What's up guys, Matty here, and today we're going to be checking out a bunch of UAD alternative plugins. Now, I've been using UAD plugins forever and I love them, but since I got my M1 MacBook last year, I've been wanting to do revisions and even some mixing outside of the studio. And I know UAD has Spark coming out now, but they don't have all their plugins at all there. And I needed certain plugins like the 33609 compressor that I love when I was moving around. So over the last year, I've come up with a bunch of alternatives and I wanted to share them with you today. So let's go. So the first plugin we'll talk about is the whole API collection, really, is the Lindell plugin 50 series, which is, plugin alliances. And this thing's fantastic because it has all the API stuff in one plugin. You have the graphic equalizer, the 550A and the 550B, and then the VCA compressor and the FET compressor here, along with the gate as well. So every API you could possibly need, all in just one plugin. So this has been a great help whenever you need that API sound. And then, of course, you have the classic API compressor. So here is the plugin alliance, or the Lindell version of it, and then you have the UAD version right here. So what we got here is this drum loop, and I'm just going to play it for you, and you will hear the Lindell first, and then the UAD version. And I got the settings pretty much the same, maybe a few changes to make volume equal, but take a listen. So they sound really close. I think maybe the Lindell sounds a little more aggressive, and that could just be compressor settings. This isn't a scientific comparison, but you definitely get that API sound. And I like how the Lindell, you can turn the compressor on and off here. It's got this nuke feature. So there's even more features available in the Lindell one, and you're getting the same sort of sound if you want that API 2500 sound. So it's a great alternative if that's what you're looking for. So the next plugin collection we're going to talk about is the Manley collection. You have the Varimu and the Massive Passive, both classic compressor and EQ. And what I've found to replace that is by Pulsar, and they both have the Massive Passive and the Varimu. So you can check it out here. Here's the Massive Passive from UAD, and then here's the Massive Passive from Pulsar. And what's cool about this one is they have a drive to it. They have a couple transformers you can switch with it. And then, of course, you have this Pro Q style EQing that you can EQ with too. So I have both of these set up. And then you have the Varimu, all the same settings. You have an extra sidechain EQ with this one, and then you can switch it to here and see the compression visually if you'd like to. So a few more features once again on the alternative of these, which I like. I feel like UAD always does a great job of doing the emulation one-to-one, and that's their thing. But I like it when a plugin company takes an original unit and pushes it forward a little bit into the future. So for this comparison, we have both the Massive Passive and the Varimu on, and the same EQ as close as I could get it, because the way these gain knobs are, they are a bit different, but they should be pretty close, and you can take a listen here. So they're pretty close. Maybe the Pulsar one sounds a little thicker, and that could be, the way they did the analog emulation. but also the UAD version almost sounds a little cleaner in maybe a good way or a bad way, depending on what you're looking for. So they both sound fantastic, I think. And, you know, I don't think anyone would notice the difference between the Manley branded one and the Pulsar one. Both sound really good, and I think both work for whatever you're looking for if you're looking for that Manley sound. Okay, the next plug we're going to check out is the 33609 by Neve. It is Compressor. It's one of my favorite compressors, so I know this one very well. I've used the UAD version forever, and it's a great compressor. It took me a few different ones to find the one I really liked to emulate the same thing the UAD did. But the one I settled with is the Arturio Diode 609, and it sounds spot on, just as good as the UAD version. What's cool about these Arturio plugins too is they always have an advanced mode where you can click and, you know, sidechain equalization, which is really cool for their 1176 compressor. You can switch this and see a different way of gain reduction. So always have a few extra things that might not be on the UAD, which, you know, always does the 1-for-1 emulation, which is fine. But anyway, let's take a listen to these. I got it compressing pretty hard on the drums, and you guys can hear the difference. So super close. It's hard to tell the difference. I bet if we closed them, we all wouldn't be able to tell. Maybe the Diode 609 is compressing a little bit harder in this example, but they both sound just about the same. And I really love using the Arturio one now. The next one is the EQ that we all know and love, the Pultec EQ1A. So this one, there's a ton of them out there, but the best one I have found is by a smaller company called Pultec, and their Pultec sounds great, and I'd like to say it probably sounds better than the actual UAD version, which I always thought was like the gold standard. I think they're really close. Like in this example, it's probably the closest one that you guys are going to hear between the two. Like if we close these and you didn't know what we were listening to, you would not be able to pick which one. They're so close together. But yeah, so let's check it out. Of course, as we've been going, the UAD's first, and then the Pultec will be second. Can't tell the difference. They sound spot on, and the Pultec is just great. And also, it's relatively cheap, so make sure to check them out. Support these smaller companies. Next is the most famous bus compressor in the world, the SSL. I actually have 3 different ones for this because I wanted to hear one more version when I was just getting this set up. But we have the SSL 4000 from UAD, then the Waves one that we've been using for years, which is also modeled up for 4000, and then the Bus Compressor 2, which is by actually SSL, and that one's supposedly more of a 9000 compressor, but I just wanted to hear the differences. So first we're going to hear the 4000 by UAD, then we'll hear the Waves one, and then we'll go into the Bus Compressor 2 by SSL. So they all have a unique sound. To me, the UAD SSL is pretty aggressive sounding. And then the Waves one almost sounds kind of relaxed to me, even though, I mean, on the meters, they're both taking about 4 dB off. But, you know, that's just the meters. It's not really probably what's happening, but it sounds more relaxed, the Wave version. And then the Bus Compressor 2 almost sounds like a little bit of a mix of both. But I think the Bus Compressor 2 by SSL the best. UAD a little too aggressive, Waves a little too relaxed, Bus Compressor kind of in the middle, and I like the sound that one gives. So you can pick. There's even more. There's hundreds of versions of the SSL bus compressor, but these are the three I had, and I think they all do that sound, but just in different ways. Okay, next we're going to use a vocal from my buddy Garrett Gregory. Make sure to check him out on Apple Music and Spotify. This is for the 1176, probably the most famous vocal compressor in the world. So we have the same settings. We're using the UAD version, and then it's going to go to the Arturia version, which we talked about earlier, has all these advanced things. We'll take that down so you don't have to look at it. But let's take a listen to these two and see what we think.
Up to you, I guess my heart is just a little too wild. Up to you, I guess my heart is just a little too wild. Up to you, I guess my heart is just a little too wild. Up to you, I guess my heart is just a little too wild.
So they sound super close. I find like with all the UAD plugins, there's not as much like low end than others. And that's not a bad thing. I actually kind of like it sometimes. Like I almost prefer, and this is minute, but I almost prefer the UAD version here compared to the Arturia. I just think UAD nails the 1176. I mean, it is their unit. It's hard to beat that one. But the good thing about that is the UAD 1176 is now with Spark, so you can take it on the road and you're good to go. So that and the LA2A are hard for me to find emulations I like better than the UAD version. But Arturia is really, really close, and with the added options you get with it, it's a fantastic option if you don't have the UAD one. Next, we got the classic DBX 160. A lot of people use this for parallel drums. What's not known so well is it's used or was used on a lot of vocals back in the early 2000s, late 90s. Very well-known pop vocal compressor. But in this case, we're going to be listening to it on drums. So we have the UAD version and then the Waves version, which is a fantastic emulation. And up till recently, you only had the mix knob here, which is why I would always use this Waves version. But now UAD finally updated all their plugins so that they have mix knobs or a mix dial, which is cool. Let's take a listen to these two and see which one you guys like better or if they're the same. So this one to me sounds very, very close. They both sound just about the same. I definitely wouldn't be able to tell the difference if we closed these and closed our eyes. So great job by both companies making that sound. I mean, it's very, punchy DBX compressor sound, and you can't go wrong with either one. The next plugin is the first compressor I actually fell in love with when I first started interning at a studio, and it was the Distressor. The hardware just looked so cool, man, when it lit up and stuff. I thought it was the coolest compressor. So I used it for years on vocals. It was my go-to, and I still do. But in this instance, we have the UAD Distressor, which is spot on, a very good version. And then a new plugin on the block by a smaller company called Keve Audio. It's called the Xtressor. And I was excited to see this because I hadn't really found a Distressor that I liked as much as the UAD one. And this one's getting really close. And what's really cool about this one is it has British mode, which is an additional thing that they added to the Distressor a few years after the original came out. And it gives it a different sound. It's kind of like the all buttons in, if I remember correctly. But it has that mode, and then it has this cool saturation and warmth options too. So a few more options than the actual just basic Distressor has, and it sounds pretty close to the UAD version. So let's take a listen. You guys can hear it for yourself. So yeah, the UAD just it sounds a little cleaner to me. Like the snare just taps out a little bit more than the Xtressor, and that could just be the different compression. If you do notice, if you're looking at the lights, I had to hit the UAD a bit harder than the Xtressor for them to sound about the same. But that's just lights. It's not really compression. But they're very close, and I don't think I could probably tell the difference between the two if you closed them up. So great job by Keve Audio for making this. I'm actually starting to use it instead of the UAD version, which is telling. Okay, the last one we're going to check out is one of the tape emulations, and they're a slightly different machine. I couldn't find an exact replica because the Studer A800 is the one that UAD has, and if I'm correct, the Slate one is a Studer A827. So slightly different machines, but the same sound. We have the same tape, 456 tape, okay? And we're doing them both at 15 IPS, okay? So let's take a listen and see what you guys think. So pretty close. I feel like the UAD one's a little more compressed sounding. Maybe we're just hitting it harder, you know, but they sound pretty close and both give that tape sound. I'm a big fan of the Slate virtual tape machine. It always puts a nice warmth on it. And simple things, the fact that they connect the input and the output together make me gravitate towards it more, because trying to set the input up on this and then the output down is always a pain in the butt. So either one could work if you're looking for that tape sound, and they're both fantastic options. So that is about it for all the UAD alternatives. One thing to note is a lot of the plugins on UAD are made by Plugin Alliance or Softtube. And recently, a lot of those have ported over to those companies' respective, own websites. So for instance, the Chandler limiter and the Chandler curve bender, which is one of my favorite plugins, was made by Softtube and was only on UAD platform, but now you can get it right from Softtube. And there's a host of other plugins like that, both from Plugin Alliance and UAD. So if there's some of those, make sure to check them out and their other sites if you're looking for a UAD alternative to some of those. Let me know your favorite UAD alternatives in the comments below. If you need your song mixed and mastered, hit me up at mixandmastermysong.com. You can also check out my new Slate course, which is an immersive course, which really helps you learn how to mix. Talk to you soon.